Welcome, everyone, to this special podcast. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the founder and editor of The Driven and founder and editor-in-chief of its sister site, Renew Economy. And joining me is Tom Rose from Evnex over in New Zealand. Tom, um, welcome to the podcast. And look, maybe you should start off by explaining what Evnex is and why you haven't called it Evnex, because that looks like the obvious thing to say.
It does look like the obvious thing to say. I'm Tom. I'm the product owner here at Evnex. We are a smart EV charger manufacturer who's based in New Zealand. So our founder, Ed Harvey, he for his final year project at university about 15 years ago, he converted his Honda Accord into a battery electric vehicle.
I think it's a wonderful story, actually, the Honda Accord, because Honda haven't bothered making an electric vehicle at all, so it had to take somebody else to come in.
Yeah, he should have sold it to them as a design, and they could have gone from there. They'd have been way ahead. But no, it was a great project, and he eventually found somebody who would certify it for him. Back then, there was about one person in the whole country, and he had to put it on a flatbed truck and take it down to Dunedin to get certified. And then he needed to figure out how to charge it. And so, being a power electronics graduate, he was like, well, I'll just design my own charger. And then he realized actually it would be quite good for these things to be smart and for them to be ready to sort of support the grid as uptake increases. And so he thought he'd found a company based on it. So we were officially founded nearly 11 years ago now, and going from strength to strength. So I joined about 4.5 years ago now, back when we had sort of 10 employees, and we're now kind of 45, and we've got a good sized team across the ditch over there in Sydney. And the head office is still here in Christchurch, New Zealand. So this is where we design, manufacture, and support our chargers from here.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because we are at that stage now where we seem to be at some sort of, well, I don't know yet whether we're quite at the tipping point, but we seem to be moving past the early adopters phase of the electric vehicle take-up. Now people are seriously thinking about what that means for the grid, how we can incorporate EV charging and even discharging into the grid, how the networks figure this out, how the retailers figure it out. And you spent a lot of time, of course, you come from the UK and what have you. And it's interesting that there's been a different approach to the retail, how the retailers are approaching EV charging. So this is fundamentally important to everyone now. So tell us about, maybe sort of highlight the differences between what you've seen in Europe and what you've seen in Australia.
Yeah, that's good question. So the European sort of penetration of EVs is a bit higher than it is in Australia and New Zealand at the moment. I mean, there's the obvious example of Norway, but even in the UK, they're up at sort of 35%, which is significantly ahead of where we are over here. A really interesting thing that they did in the UK space is that I think it's about 8 years ago now, they directed the lines companies to pursue what they called a flexibility first approach. And what that essentially meant was, if you felt that you were going to need to build a whole load more infrastructure, new poles and wires to support an increase in electricity as a result of electrification, one of the chief things obviously being EVs, but also things like, heat pumps and people having more air conditioning because it's getting hotter and all these kind of things. The lines companies were directed to try first to manage the load automatically, and only then, if they couldn't do that, to build new poles and wires. So effectively, they kind of did a load of technology work, sort of pilots and demonstrations. They stood up a market where they would sort of procure, people would say, I need the load to be reduced at this time and it to be increased at that time. And you could trade on that. And so suddenly all these ecosystems evolved around that. And so they're quite far ahead of where we are in Australia and New Zealand at the moment because, they've been doing this for years and they contract loads of energy in that way now. And it's helping to reduce the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built, and it's helping to reduce the bills of the consumer as a result, because they obviously don't have to, do all that capex to go and build things. So where we are, I'd say in Australia right now, we're absolutely starting to see this. You'll have read about trials that have been going on, that people have been experimenting with this stuff. But I would say that where the UK is ahead is in that sort of consumer facing options that you have from retailers. Not nowhere near as much of that has sort of come to pass yet in Australia, but we are seeing green shoots, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I wonder if that's got something to do with the way that we're integrated in Australia. See, we seem to have sort of the retailers and the network operators seem to be the different people, whereas I think that's much more sort of vertically integrated along those lines in the UK. But that's probably another discussion. But we're starting to make progress now, and it's true. We're seeing all the retailers coming out and they're making special offers about maybe zero charging in the middle of the day or sort of chip charging overnight. You've got the other ones such as Amber, which we'll get onto, who have like a dynamic pricing thing. You can sort of expose yourself to the market or not, according to or to how that's integrated. But maybe let's just sort of start at the basics about sort of defining what exactly smart EV charging is, because it might not be immediately obvious just the sort of the extent of the full gamut of what's proposed.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I like to think of smart EV charging as largely knowing when not to charge. Because there's a lot of times when it would be ideal not to charge, or maybe not to charge at full speed. So the obvious examples would be, if you do have one of those kind of tariffs like you talked about, where you might get cheap power overnight from sort of midnight till 6 a.m., then when you plug your car in when you get home from work at 6 p.m., you don't want it to charge for 6 hours. You want it to start at midnight when the price goes down. So it's a smart thing to do to not charge. And a sort of a less smart charger or a uh, trickle charger would usually just start as soon as you plugged it in. So it's smart not to. Um, and the other obvious one is when you have solar and you want to probably charge not at full speed, because first thing in the morning you're going to have a little bit of excess as the sun comes up, and so you want to sort of charge at a slow speed, and then gradually as the day goes on you charge faster and faster as there's more solar, and then slower and slower again as the sun starts to go down. So you essentially want your charging speed to track your excess generation. So those are the two sort of common smart charging things to do today. The second of those is sort of perhaps more interesting in the sense that you've got an external signal, i.e., how much excess solar do I have, that you're using to decide how fast to charge. But I think that we're increasingly going to have more and more external signals that come along, like, how much capacity is there on your local network? And if there's not very much, then the signal will be saying, I'd rather you didn't charge at the moment. What's the wholesale price doing of electricity? And your retailer will be saying, well, actually the wholesale price has just gone down, so let's charge and I can give you a really good rate. Or, oh, actually it's just gone up because maybe somebody accidentally drove a digger through a big cable and we've got a whole power station gone offline and suddenly the price has gone crazy, so well, let's stop everyone. So we're going to start seeing these kind of signals coming in to say when is a good time to charge and when is a less good time to charge.
And presumably, then the sort of the equipment that you guys are rolled out. Maybe now's a chance to sort of talk about the sort of the equipment that Evnex offers. Have you got like one standard product, or is there multiple different sort of things that can be applicable to different situations?
Yeah, so we've got we tend to focus more on the home residential market. We think that's sort of our sort of niche where we can really differentiate well because of our sort of locality to the region. So we focus only on the Australian and New Zealand markets. And so we have a great charger for that, the family called the E2 range. So those are single phase 7 kilowatt chargers. So they'd basically fill almost any battery overnight if you plug them in and charge the whole night. In practice, most people tend to charge for only about 3 hours a day or 3 hours a session, because you can get enough in there, which is why these plans where you get three free hours from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. and things like that are so good, because you can actually basically fill your car for free during that time.
Well, that's right. And the reality is we don't actually drive that much, really.
No,
Unless we're sort of doing long distances. We drive, 50, 60 kilometers a day. So, yeah, a couple of hours of charging and it's back up again.
Yeah, and it's nice to have the speed that it means that when you do come back from a big long journey and you arrive at 10%, that you've got the confidence that it'll fill right back up overnight. But you're right, in practice, it's probably only a few hours of charging, but you might be plugged in for 12, 14, 16 hours at a time. So it kind of doesn't matter in many ways when that happens. So yeah, we've got the residential range. We've also got a sort of slightly more commercial range. which sort of has RFID cards for swiping if you want to have sort of provide access control or sort of account for charging via different vehicles in a fleet or something like that. So we've got a sort of commercial and a residential range, but we tend to focus a little bit more heavily on the residential space.
Okay. And you kind of focus on just on charging at the moment. Will you be also looking at bi-directional charging and things like that?
Yeah, so we don't have a bi-directional charger on the market yet. We'll be making an announcement later this year on that.
Sounds like you're working on it then.
We are working on it, and what we've seen, as your listeners will probably be well aware, is that there's quite a few that are sort of starting to come onto the market now, which is really exciting. Obviously, at the moment, there's still quite a bit of sort of uncertainty in terms of like, how does it work with my warranty? Does it work with every car? So those things, like, it's great that somebody's out there blazing the trail as the sort of product person in our organization. I think as we're heading into that early majority and away from the early adopters, that the early majority is not really going to want to get involved in the, is this going to work or not? And they just need something that's simple and is going to work in an ecosystem that's static and compatible. And so from our perspective, we're sort of focusing more on that. And so we're therefore waiting a little bit until some of that stuff settles down and we get to the point where we can confidently release something and go, it's going to be pretty close to universal.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of talk about sort of vehicle to grid, and we now have people who own cars that are nominally capable of it. We have the networks who seem to be comfortable with it. We have companies like yours who are rolling out cables and that can do it. We're just kind of waiting on the car makers themselves to actually sort of get with the warranty. And I'm not too sure what the hold up there is. It's probably not really a subject for this conversation, but anyway, so it's almost there.
Yeah, it's so close to being there. I think they're probably just worried about the amount of information they've got on it yet, and they don't want to be in a situation where somebody uses it extensively and then their car battery degrades quickly, and then it's like, well, hang on, whose fault is that? And they're working through those things, but we're getting very, very close, and we've obviously got some things that are out there that, like, certain combinations that already work, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, maybe you can sort of tell us more about those, because we talked about the retailers earlier on and about how the ones in Europe have been sort of, largely ahead of what's happening in Australia. But one of the most innovative companies in Australia is Amber, and you guys are sort of integrated or got an integration agreement with them. So sort of tell us a bit more about how and why and what.
Yeah, okay. So for those people who don't know, Amber is a sort of retailer with a bit of a difference. The way they price electricity for you is you pay them an upfront platform fee. So I think it's like $20 a month or something like that. And they then sell you electricity at the price that it is on the wholesale market at that moment. So every 5 minutes, the price is calculated and they will sell it to you at the price that it costs at that point. They don't make any cut on that. And the really interesting thing is they will also buy it back from you at the sell price at any one time. So if you've got a battery or if you've got solar and there's some kind of an event that causes the price to go crazy, Amber lets you have access to all that upside. You can sell you can discharge your battery, or in future, increasingly your car, into the grid and do a great job of taking advantage of that. Obviously, from a charging perspective, you would be incentivized to try and make sure that your car charges at the cheapest times of day. So what Amber have done is they've got a whole load of tools that you can work with. That so they've got a tool that automatically optimizes your battery and figures out, I should charge it from 3 till 5 a.m. because that's when the wholesale price is cheap, and then I'll discharge it at 7 a.m. when everyone's making their breakfast and prices go high, and then I'll charge it again at midday when there's lots of excess solar, and then I'll discharge it again. So they optimize all of that with your battery, and they also provide a signal that allows somebody like us to find out what's the price for this particular customer at this particular 5-minute period. So it's amazingly sort of precise what your price is. Your price might be different to somebody who lives 2 streets down because of something to do with the network that means it's more expensive here than there. So we can get the price from them, and you can set up on your charger a sort of a threshold price, and you say, if the price drops below this point, I want you to charge as fast as you can off the grid, because I think that's really, that's really cheap and great value. So you might set that down at sort of 5 cents, and then it's like, my car will charge for a bit. When the price goes below 5 cents, it might stop again for an hour because there's more usage and it's gone back above it, and charge again. You can even set it negative, and if you're in summer and the prices literally go negative, which they do from time to time. I mean, they might go down as low as sort of paying you 20 cents a unit to charge your car, which sounds mad, but occasionally that happens. Or it might cost you $20 per unit to charge your car. So the other threshold we set is like a maximum price threshold. And so if you see the price spike above that maximum price threshold, it will stop charging immediately. And then there's one other nuance, which is if it's in between those thresholds. So if you're saying, I'd love to just go for it if it's under 5 cents, I don't want to pay for it if it's above 20, but if it's in between those, I don't really want to consume off the grid, but I'm prepared to not earn the 20 cents from exporting my solar. I will use any solar I have and put it into my car. So you've got a window where you're going, I'll take the solar. Below that, you're going, just go off the grid as fast as you can. And above that, you go, no, stop everything. I'm going to export my battery and earn my megabucks. And so we think that you can probably save somewhere on the region of $400 to $500 a year potentially on your charging by setting those numbers at the right values and getting a good optimization for your home.
Is that complicated to actually do? I mean, do you need to do that? Do you need to sort of rethink it every season? Do you need to sort of rethink it every week, or could you just sort of set it for a quarter or a year or whatever?
Yeah, I think we've had this thing out in the market now for about sort of 2 months, and people in trials for maybe twice as long as that. We haven't seen that people have wanted to move it that much. I think that we may well find that people sort of want to do kind of a summer price threshold and a winter price threshold. But you definitely don't need to do it sort of day to day. Like, the general thing would be plug it in and it will handle turning on and off. And within their app, the Evnex app, it'll say things like, I'm not charging at the moment because the price is too high, but the forecast price comes down at 2 p.m. and I'm expecting to start charging at that point. So you get a decent idea of what it's going to do, so that you can sort of plan ahead. And if you looked at that and it said the price is going to be high for 3 weeks, I'm not charging for ages, you could go, oh, okay, maybe I better actually just pay a bit more this time.
Okay.
But generally speaking, it gives you, you can override it as a one-off or as a sort of permanent change.
Yeah, I was going to say there might be times when your car might be half full, but you suddenly realize that in a couple of hours you need to go somewhere quite a distance, so you're going to charge anyway. You might not want to charge at $20 an hour or kilowatt hour, but you might just unplug it and go down to the nearest fast charger or something like that. But
yeah, at that point you probably would be better off doing that. It's pretty rare that it gets that high, but it's not unprecedented. Like, we've definitely seen it a few times.
Okay, so your equipment at the moment, I mean, it sounds like it's going to eventually involve discharging back into the grid or back into the house or whatever. But you're sort of linking up with Amber, bringing stuff into the grid at the right times, but also sort of playing with the battery as well. So you're sort of downloading sometimes from the battery, sometimes from the solar, sometimes from the grid.
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on sort of how exactly you've kind of wired it into your home. It is a little bit unfortunate that there are some decisions that you kind of effectively have to make at the point that you wire your charger into your home wiring system, which means that they're sort of a bit harder to change down the track. You'd actually have to get an electrician out to move them. But basically, there's quite a lot of options for how you want that to behave, depending on what your sort of usual lifestyle is. If you're somebody who's often at home during the day and you expect that most of your charging is going to be on solar, and you basically never want your home battery to go into your car, you can wire it up one way. If you think that actually you're quite often going to want to use this at night, and sometimes you're going to want to use anything left in your battery to put it into your car because you're going to be able to charge that up really, really cheaply at 5 o'clock in the morning, you might want to do it that way. So there are some decisions you have to make kind of at the point of installation. But quite a lot of it you can actually just change through settings as time goes on, and as you're as you understand your use patterns better.
Yeah. And so what sort of things do you want to see in sort of in terms of the retail space sort of going forward? I mean, I don't know whether it's a matter of the way the retailers approach it themselves or whether it's kind of regulation or policies or things like that. What have you, where are we heading and where would you like to see us go?
Yeah, I mean, so I think Amber have done a great thing there by having the wholesale price available to people who want to take advantage of that, and putting together all those tools to sort of give you access to the upside. There's obviously quite a lot of risk associated with that. And so, if your home battery has drained and you need to use some power and it's $20 a kilowatt hour, you're going to have to pay that amount of money with Amber. So that's the risk you have to take on. A lot of other retailers sort of hide you from that risk by, historically they're giving you a completely flat price that you just pay at all times, no matter what the wholesale market is doing. Or increasingly, you're starting to see these ones now where you've got, two, three, maybe four different prices at different times of the day, but they're still sort of quite statically just repeating, midnight till 6 is this, 6 till 9 is that, 9 till, that kind of thing. So I think what you're seeing in the UK is something that I would call like a type of use price. So the varying prices at different times is a time of use price. So depending on what time you use the energy, you pay a different price. A type of use price is something where you say, I will let you do all of your EV charging for a really great price, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But in order for me to be able to offer that, you have to let me decide when it happens. So every day I'm going to plug it in, and every day my retailer is going to decide, oh yes, the forecast is that the right time to do it today is in this window. Tomorrow it might be in that window. The next day it might be in that window or in two different windows. And so this is something that you're seeing quite a bit in the UK. In Australia, so Origin already have something that looks a bit like this, that at the moment only works with, it talks straight to the vehicle. So I think it works with Teslas and maybe BMWs and Mercedes, something like that, but it's not universal. It doesn't work with every car. So we'd love to see that working with a charger, because then you'd be universal as to which car you work with. So that's something called a type of use price. Another thing that I think is really good is these ones where there's sort of windows where it's completely free. So I think OVO have their EV plan has 3 hours where it's completely free, kind of over the middle of the day when there's loads of excess solar. And so if you've got a wall mounted charger that can put a really decent amount of energy into your car in 3 hours, that's clearly a very good option for you, because provided you're at home during those 3 hours, you can, probably add 250 kilometers of range in that time. And as we've already said, that for most people, that's probably 3 days of driving, if not more. So those kind of things are great. Beyond that, there's sort of even more sort of dynamic shifting where someone like Octopus Energy in the UK have plans where they can sort of on an individual day incentivize you to move charging away, because they know there's some event happening that means that there's going to be a shortfall at this period. So it might be a sort of a weather event. Let's say suddenly it was a really still day and it was really cold. You might be like, okay, I'm going to struggle to have enough energy in this little window here. So I'd like to incentivize people to charge there or there. So they sort of say, we'll give you some money to move yourself out here. I mean, that's all well and good if you can be bothered to go and watch all the notifications and plug it in. But it would be much easier if the charger just knew that as well and said, great, I'm just going to put your charging here. So all of those are ways to effectively avoid the need to build more infrastructure. And therefore, with the money that's saved from that, you can pass that on to the consumer in the form of cheaper pricing. And, at Evnex, our vision is that every journey is powered by clean and affordable energy. And so, this really speaks to the affordable pillar by making sure that we can ensure that people charge with the cheapest electricity possible.
It's fascinating when you think about it. Like a decade ago, basically all our hot water systems were sort of turned on automatically in the middle of the night. At one sort of certain point of the time, and that was happening come what may. And the irony of it is, in places like South Australia, which they had to sort of switch on a whole bunch of gas plants to sort of to service that at that time. But now we've just sort of seen this amazing sort of dynamism and flexibility in the market, and it just really goes to how we think about a renewable grid. We're kind of thinking, oh, well, we can't have this because the wind might not shine and the sun might not shine and the wind might not blow. But we have such flexibility over the way we use electricity that we might not need to charge our cars or do things at those times, and we can just simply seamlessly and without having to think about it, move an awful lot of our consumption to times when the wind does blow and the sun does shine, or the battery is full.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so the electricity industry roughly has sort of spent 100 to 150 years with the same model, which is you have a whole bunch of giant power stations sort of in the middle and a load of, like we sort of call it hub and spoke, loads of wires going out from them, and people are using electricity around the edges. And now suddenly we've got this world where all these things around the edges are, you can see what they're doing. You didn't used to be able to see. You can actually ask them to do different things, and some of them will inject energy back in the other direction. So there's this massive transformation that's occurring. But it's such a huge opportunity, as you say, like, with the intermittent renewable, you can match your supply and your demand kind of on a second by second basis by saying, oh, yep, could we turn that charger on? Could we turn that heat pump down? Could we make that air conditioning unit run a bit less? And you can actually just sort of live keep those things in balance, which is what the grid needs to be able to do. And as you say, like smartly being able to do that is technologically within our grasp today. We just need to sort of figure out, I think the main challenge is sort of figuring out the commercial arrangements and how we bring all of the consumers along on this journey, keep the social license of being able to do that by doing it well, and by clearly and obviously passing the benefits on to the consumers themselves, because they'll know if the wool is being pulled over their eyes. You've got to make sure that you're saying, I've done this thing that benefits all of us, and here's your portion of it.
Yeah, that's actually really important, because there's probably been a lot of things which will come along in new technologies, and consumers, might have felt they benefited at some point, but then feel that they're not benefiting. And I think this is an opportunity now to really make sure that they actually do benefit. And I think by having that sort of visibility and that flexibility is fundamental. It's great to know that we're actually not going to be forced to live in caves as this renewable revolution comes along, and that we actually have all these technologies at hand. But as you sort of say, it's really about the integration, the rolling of that out. So it sort of speaks to sort of policy, regulation, business models, the approach of all those utilities. And it's fantastic that companies like Evnex can sort of provide that technology, which kind of links people, for the big and the small and all the other consumers, and can sort of do bi-directional different things and feeding both ways and dynamic stuff. So it feels that it's kind of feels as though we're at the starting point of the sort of the next big leap in this transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of the underpinning technology has been being worked on for a number of years now, and you've probably read about trials, loads of them sort of being done by AEMO and Arena and things like this, who have experimented with how this might work in a sort of low volume environment. But we're suddenly getting to the point where actually there's a meaningful amount of energy being used by these cars now. And so we need to start thinking about how this is going to work. We don't want to end up in a scenario where, like Australia did with solar uptake, where it sort of, skyrocketed so quickly that we weren't really ready for it. And suddenly you had this problem of massive oversupply in the middle of the day. So I think people have there's been an element of taking that lesson to heart and trying to get in a bit ahead this time round, which is great. But we're at the point now, as you say, where we need to start, the rubber is hitting the road, and we need to start actually making these into sort of consumer products that the retailers work with, that the lines companies work with, and that the equipment providers work with, that's going to enable us to actually deliver these benefits for both the grid and for the consumer.
Yeah. Yes, I sort of see often these little announcements being made, and I'm just thinking, oh no, not another bloody trial. Can we just get out and do it? But now we are, and that's good. And now we know we have the technologies. We know that by and large there's a lot of spare capacity in the grid that we can use with all these dynamic charging and these flexible things. There's a lot of price volatility which people can plug into at the right time. And if they choose to, and they're minded to do so, they can even profit from it. It's a whole new world, and my big hope is that it's not too complicated.
Well, you see, I think that's where my job comes in as the sort of product thinking person at Evnex is how do we make this accessible? Like, how do we make this an ecosystem where, you know, we've worked with all the retailers, we can set it up automatically to do the right thing for you. Um, and it might be something that sounds easy. It's like, oh, well, it's obvious what the right thing for me to be would be. But, it's so dependent on your vehicle usage and when you're at home and not, and what your pricing looks like, and whether your retailer offers this or that, and whether you've got solar and whether you've got a battery, and the number of variables sort of skyrockets very quickly. And so making something that just automatically does the best thing for every person is really difficult. And of course, every person has different values. Some people are there trying to make sure that they charge as greenly as possible. So they might be trying to, the signal they want to follow is the carbon signal. And there's other people who are wanting to charge as cheaply as possible. So they want to follow a price signal. So it really depends on what your sort of personality is about how you want this to be done. And trying to make that work for everybody is, as you say, technically possible, but a very difficult challenge to do at scale. And so this is where we see our big advantage of sort of being local, is that we sort of fundamentally understand the Australian energy retail space. And we're here to work with all of them to try and make sure that everybody gets the best charging experience.
Okay. Well, Tom, it's been great talking to you. It's been fascinating, and look forward to hearing more developments as you sort of tie up with more retailers, and maybe in a few months' time make announcements about bi-directional charging. And in the meantime, let's hope that everyone can be incredibly dynamic and flexible in their charging and knowing when not to charge. So,
Yeah, exactly. That's the smartest charging of all.
good idea. Tom Rose from Evnex, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.